Yando, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man.
So one of the things that you said earlier on in the week was that programming is probably more important than biomechanics. What do you mean by that?
So, you know what? I'd go as far as saying like it definitely is more important. Like, of course, there's going to be some aspects to where biomechanics is very important, and no doubt it can play a big role in like how you program. The foundation of programming often comes from, I mean, we'll get into it later on, but often comes from like how someone is built and what they're moving like. So it's important, but a big thing also is we've seen people go very far, we could say, without having that like optimal form or having form that we might consider to not be optimal for them, right? And that is because of their programming, and you can still progress a long way with having a good program. So I often find even if a lifter comes to me and their form isn't very good or whatever, you can get them very far from just having a good program, and you wouldn't be limited by their biomechanics or how they move unless you get into things like pain or those things there. Rarely ever do I find the way they move limiting them in regards to them getting stronger, only if their technique is like very bad and they can't like lift like a high RPE, they can't get a lot of volume in the program. But then again, those all tie into the program itself, right? So I do find that program tends to be like the biggest part of where my focus is, because I feel like that's the biggest return on investment in regards to like my worth. But of course, like I know it's also important. Yeah.
I think I definitely think that, and I'm probably not alone in this. I definitely think that over the last sort of three to 4 years, I think like PRI, and I think like, you know, Bill Hartman's expansion compression model has like definitely made a bit of a mark in the world of powerlifting. And I think I definitely went down the rabbit hole on that one. And I think that, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, like I still think about programming a lot, but I think there's, because of, you know, once you go into this rabbit hole, I don't know if you ever went down that rabbit hole a little bit.
So not as much, but I did learn it a little while, and then I was going into it, I was like, am I really learning things that are game changer for how I'm going to program? So I didn't go as far into it because I was soon realized that I'm not learning a lot that I can actually apply for my clients, right? So I didn't get too deep into it, and like the return on investment, as I mentioned, it didn't feel like too great, which is why I never really got like too deep into it.
I think I definitely, I would say I'm still kind of there, but I'm definitely like getting myself not out completely, because I still find it really interesting. I think like historically, like if I quickly mention about, if I quickly talk about how like I got into coaching powerlifting in the first place, which was back in 2010. I think it was 2010 when I first started getting into powerlifting. I ended up getting quite a bad injury. And so ever since then, I was always quite obsessed with biomechanics, just because understanding biomechanics sort of like helped me put people in better positions that were anecdotally going to be like safer for them. And I think, you know, ever since I sort of understood, ever since I sort of like got into that rabbit hole of like PRI, expansion compression, it definitely helped me solve quite a few problems. And I think that sort of like eureka moment where it's like, oh, okay, this helps. Like implementing this sort of drill helps. You know, putting people in certain positions for the accessories like definitely helped. And I think it definitely provided some like principles and framework. And I think at the end of the day, the thing that I realized, and I think I sort of questioned myself, was, am I making these powerlifters better? Because it was like, okay, it got to a point where like certain people were feeling, you know, like they weren't injured, but they were feeling niggles here and there, like, you know, like low level injuries, if you want to call it that. And it definitely helped me solve a lot of those problems. But then like the other thing that I started to realize was that actually load management was going to be a big factor. Like some of the sort of, let's say, asymmetries or compensations that you see, so much of it is just like having too much overload. And and then I made that realization. I was like, okay, I'm going to take a step back and be like, okay, you know what? this whole PRI thing, this expansion compression model thing is probably not like there's a limit to how much it's going to help you become a better lifter. I mean, better coach to improve the lifters, right? And then, I think.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah. So I'm been through injuries too, right?
Yeah.
And have athletes who have been injured too.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they go to a physio, right? They get a few things given to them.
Yeah.
They do those things, and you would know like where they get in the end.
Yeah.
Nowhere. They feel the same.
Do you know what? It's I don't know if someone else coined this term, but it's in that forever rehab phase.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I also realized, like in terms of like my professional development as a coach, was like you have to, what's the word? There's a very fine line with like understanding these sort of concepts enough and knowing where enough is, because there's a trade-off, because you can always feel a little bit insecure because you don't understand something, right? And that's what sort of drags you into that rabbit hole, right? Like you don't like the unknown. And I think, I've definitely noticed it in maybe one or two other people as well, where they go into that rabbit hole and it's like, you forgot to just get them stronger, you know? Like, fine, you're going to get an extra 5 degrees of internal rotation on your left side, but are they PBing on a platform?
That's what I'm saying, right? And a lot of times you can still PB whilst having these movement inefficiencies, right? And I feel like when it comes to coaching and what you give to athletes, you've got to be very cautious of like giving lifters like this exercise to try and fix certain pains, because they become someone who doesn't take into account how important the management of load is. So they feel like whenever they get hurt, they're like, oh, I want to go do this movement to try and like resolve the pain. When you know that you can just like go a bit lower RP or lower volume, you should be fine next week. You don't have to always like try and add more. They always like, so you got hurt from doing too much.
Yeah.
And they go out and do more on the pain. It's like, you need to relax a little bit. There are things to help you out, but a lot of times they just end up like doing more load and making it worse. So it's like a lot of times you can just like get away with not doing anything apart from just lowering the load for a little bit, and you should be okay. Yeah. And then obviously over time you got to go back up slowly, but you don't need to like do back extensions. You've got back pain. You can just chill out a little bit and you'll be good.
Yeah. So what comes first, the microcycle or the macrocycle?
That's a good question. And I was thinking about it for a little while, right? When they get an athlete, what am I looking at first? I'm looking at like how they're built, what their current program looks like, do they have any injuries and whatever. And then I tend to like do like a little micro plan of split. So I'm figuring out like what days I want to be them, their primary days, what days can they train on, what can they train on? And I'm making a program around that first. So I do start like from, the micro and getting that sorted out first. But I guess it depends on the athlete I have too. So I did a story recently where I was talking about like, if you have a new athlete who's competing very soon and you haven't got much experience in them, there are things you can do to make sure that you can get a more predictable outcome. SB days on the weekend, those sort of things are taking account long-term or what they're going to be doing in the future, right? So there is a bit of like long-term thinking, even with like how I'm planning a micro, depending on who I've got as an athlete. So if we're competing in 4 weeks time, right? First athlete, no history. Yeah. I likely want to do a split where I'm going to have a very predictable outcome. So having your primary days at the end of the week, so I can peak you a bit easier versus having it like more spread out in a week. It's going to be a bit more finicky in regards to getting you strong all on the same day, right? Yeah. So it does come together. Like I got to think long term or where we want to be in a few weeks time. How much time do we have to play about with things or like, I guess, figure things out? And that plays a big role in regards to how I'm planning the program. So if we have a lot of time, I can like figure things out. I'd say I'm more like micro than expanding. But if we have a short amount of time, I am thinking more long term to see what we need to be doing in a short time frame.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So if we go back to the long term discussion, like I think it's, traditionally one of the things that you see in like sports performance and like S&C and other sports, or even like old school powerlifting, like it was very much like things will be planned out almost to the T, like long term. But obviously, like, having a slightly more bottom up approach seems to be a lot more common use now. How far, if you, let's say, you work with an athlete for a couple months, you figured out like a meso cycle that works pretty well for them, they're an intermediate lifter, like how far in advance would you plan out their sort of training, like
Yeah.
in a year?
Naturally, it will depend on how competitive they are, what they have like planned up. If you're going like worlds or nationals, then those things are going to be very important
Yeah.
parts. You've got to qualify for a competition. So really like thinking far in regards to like, what is the end goal? Are you a powerlifter? Do you want to compete? And, you know, what's the best time for us to compete to give us a lot of time to like just progress very well? So I do say normally I'm thinking 16 weeks max.
So about 4 months.
Yeah, about
Okay.
4 months-ish. And I'm not even thinking about it too deeply, right? Like,
What do you mean by that?
I don't know what I'm going to do like on the program in 16 weeks time or 12 weeks time, but I sort of have like an average RP for how heavy I want the block to be. And that's like at most how I'm thinking, I'd say, how heavy this block needs to be for them to hit whatever goal we have coming up, right? So a good example is if we're going to peak next block, I rarely have someone like go very heavy the block before they're going to peak because I want them to enter that block in a good state, right? So that's me thinking at least like 9-8 weeks in advance or 10 weeks in advance for a 5-week block. So it depends on what we have in the future, naturally, right? But I'd say thinking too deeply about it, as in like what reps are we going to do for everything and whatnot, isn't something I go too deep into because a lot can change in one block, right?
Yeah.
So I never plan out a block in advance. I'm only planning out a block at a time. I would never plan like on program like 2 blocks out just because I know how much can change within a single block.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one, right? Because one of the things that I occasionally get from my lifters is, and I sort of program probably in a similar way to you in terms of like how far I actually plan ahead. One of the things that one of the questions I get from like maybe like 2 or 3 of my lifters is like, oh, what are we going to be doing training wise over the next 2 seasons? Like, how do you approach, you know, because some lifters, they just want to have that level of certainty, like a roadmap. And it's just, you know, for some people, they sort of yearn to have that knowledge, if that makes sense, of like, oh, there's a direction that we're going here. How do you, you know, if we're not, you know, if it's not useful to plan that far ahead, how do you approach, you know, how do you answer that question? How do you respond to an athlete like that?
So you know what's good is that we have a question coming up about, you know, the golden micro, and this ties in very well, right?
Yeah.
I guess we can go straight into it, right?
All right. So obviously the golden microcycle is a phrase that's been commonly thrown around quite a lot. Where did it really come from, and what do people need to understand about the golden microcycle?
Where did it come from? Americans, I think.
Was it American? Because
Where did you hear it
I know,
from?
like conceptually, probably, but I don't think I've heard the actual term used by Americans until maybe some of the Australians. I think I've definitely heard the Purple Motion guys
Motion, maybe.
use the term.
I might have saw it there first,
Yeah,
maybe.
I think, but conceptually speaking, I think it's, you know, definitely influenced by Mike Teixeira, and sort of his emergent strategies approach to sort of microcycle design, and how like long-term sort of programming, you know, emerges from that sort of repeated microcycle. And it seems to be that a lot of people have you know, they're all sort of their own sort of idea behind it. Like what, like for a lifter who's sort of trying to figure out how to program, but like, what do people need to understand it like conceptually, and what is it not? Like, where's the limit to it?
So very important, right? You gotta know like what a micro is, right? And in most cases, that's the 1 week of training. So let's talk about golden micro. What's the goal of the micro, right?
Yeah.
And in most cases, we would have like priority of the days in the week. So for me, it's like, do we have something that we know what's going on in that micro? That's a big part of it. If you've got primary days and secondary days, are you coming into those days performing how you should be performing? That's the biggest thing, I think, with the golden micro, right? But
how do you mean by that? Like how they should be performing? Like,
so if you have a primary day, which you hope to be stronger, is it actually stronger than other days, right? And a big part with the golden micro as well is that normally we come find 7 days in a week, right? Which means if you're going to gym like twice a week for a certain lift, you're scoring on Monday and Thursday, you're going to have some variance in how you perform because you have different rest times between the 2 days. So we need to be thinking smartly about like what we're putting on each day to have performance be predictable and capitalize on the days you want to hit certain things, right? So you have a day where you want to go heavier. Why do you want to go heavier? Touch more weight, get more confident. So it depends a lot on like what goals you have for that athlete, right? So yeah, I think the micro is all about like being strong on certain days, right? You can't have. I think everyone who's using the term golden micro has that like sort of priority in regards to like their days like primary, secondary, tertiary, right? And it's
just for people who don't know, like,
Yeah.
what is it that we need to understand about what a primary session is and a non-primary session?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know why? Because there isn't like a framework for what they should be, right? I'm saying it as in like we expect it to be stronger because it isn't like always the case, and sometimes that can be okay.
So like in essence, it's the day you want to be strong.
Yeah.
It's the day that you want to be stronger at.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
is that necessarily like a day that has the most
No,
work on that day,
yeah.
or the highest peak intensity? Like what
Yeah.
is this primary day?
Is a good question as well, because it's not even just strongest, but you might have like a big goal. So sometimes I'm programming like a variation on primary day because I want them to focus more on getting better at that variation to get some sort of goal. So I think the primary day is the day we're just focusing more on the biggest goal of the big picture, right? The meso. So the primary days depend on what are currently the biggest goals and what I'm gonna focus on the most. If it's like technique wise, likely we're gonna doing whatever I think would be best for them technique wise to be on that primary day to give us the most focus. So for me, we're having the most like intent, the most like focus on the primary day, and as it gets lower, secondary, tertiary, quaternary, then the like energy we bring to session might be less. The intent we have for might be less because like controlling how you feel mentally is also a big factor in regards to like the micro. Not everyone can come into every session like blocked in and like putting a lot of effort in. So that is a big part in regards to like how we want to have these days. Do you want to have them coming in like amped up every single workout? Probably not, because that's a very important part of like managing, you across the board.
So then how do we go as a coach or someone who potentially might write their own training? Like how do we go from like, okay, we've got a microcycle that might be golden.
Yeah.
How do we sort of
expand that
into a mesocycle, into a training block?
Ooh. This goes back to like planning long term, right? So plan long term momentum. How can we gain momentum block to block? How heavy should we start? How heavy do we end? And those are the biggest factors which are hard to answer in general because it depends on the person, right? So a lot of the things you find right comes from trial and error. Like there is no like amazing framework to say like, hey, start your bench at 7. That's optimal. So making it larger, it just depends on the athlete and their history and their biomechanics, how they lift as well. So it's a good question how each lift responds to each other. So you might want to have your deadlift at the start of the micro because it impacts your squat in some way. So it's a tough question to answer because we're thinking, this is like what programming is essentially, right? You can't like this. How you be a good programmer? Like, there's a lot to it, right?
I think being a good programmer is like knowing how to respond to the data that's being presented. Like, you never expect like the way I sort of see it with turning a golden micro into a meso is like you don't necessarily expect the first run to be necessarily perfect, but it's about where you go from there. It's like, okay, we're going to try something like this. We're going to sort of have some sort of intensity progression, right? And it might be the case that, depending on like someone's like training history, the way I sort of approach it is kind of like, if we're doing something completely different, I might get someone to repeat that microcycle for maybe 2 to 3 weeks just to see like, are we responding to this? Are we stimulating anything from this? Or actually we understimulating? Are we suddenly like getting weaker, right? So I might run it like the first 2 to 3 weeks and just sort of get the athlete response. Like, is this feeling like, are you feeling like not sore, but like everything's suddenly getting like heavier? And then from there, depending on like how they respond to that first 2 to 3 weeks, I might just have some sort of arbitrary sort of progression with that intensity just to see like, okay, let's titrate that intensity up and like, we'll do it to the point that you start to crash a little bit, right? And it's normally, I normally sort of expect athletes to sort of hit a plateau and then, or have like reduce performance for like at least 2 weeks before I deload them, just to be sure like, okay, we're definitely like crashed here.
Yeah.
And then I sort of like base that, and I normally like keep the length of like training blocks between 4 to maybe 6-7 weeks, maybe like sometimes 8, like depending on like who the person is. And then, based on like their peak performance, like time to peak performance, like how long in that training block before they start to hit a brick wall. And I'll use that and leverage that to help me design the next one. So if they hit a brick wall real quick and like when they're at that RP7 week, they really crash, right? It might be like, okay, so you're very intensity sensitive. Let's like elongate how long you spend on that sort of RP4 to 5 in that meso, and then sort of refine it from there. And I think one of the things that's really helpful is you can easily get what was it, paralysis through analysis, and you have to understand that like there is no sort of like perfect like block. You just have like successful blocks, and if it's successful, just go with it.
Yeah,
right?
I agree, and I think starting out as a coach, I spent a lot of time like wasting time thinking. I think everyone does. You just think too much, trying to get like, perfect straight away.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I'm like, this could work.
Yeah.
I think it'll work.
Yeah.
Try it out,
and that's it. And,
yeah,
and I think that's the thing about chasing success. I think one of the things about the golden microcycle, and I think for a very short period of time, I got into that mindset was because of the phrase golden. You think you get into that sort of perfectionistic mindset. I definitely was there. It's like, oh, how do I know if this is golden?
Yeah.
It's like, nah. At the end of the day, it's just like business, right? Like if you're starting a company, there's no perfect company. Like every company will have its like trade-offs. Every company will have its like flaws. But at the end of the day, what you want is like a successful company. And so if you're coaching an athlete, what you want is a successful athlete. There is no perfect athlete.
Yeah, I think golden just means like this works.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
People define it by like, this thing works and it works repeatedly.
Yeah.
Until it doesn't.
So whenever you take on a new but current lifter who is already competing and has issues with progress, so when you're taking on a new client, like what are the sort of most common things that you see are going wrong when it comes to like progress issues?
Yeah. So there are a lot of parts to this, right? I think one of the biggest things is a lot of athletes tend to lose buy-in in their coach. That's why I tend to see, like, I ask them, like, how come you're leaving coach? A lot of times, like, the communication wasn't there, like, there are things in the program that I didn't understand. So athletes do have, like, a big role in regards to, like, how the whole thing works, right? They don't ask them questions, then they won't know certain things. And oftentimes they can, like, go into, like, a bubble or a shell and not, like, ask, like, why are we doing certain things? And it could be a good reason to doing it, but then they don't have that buy-in to the coach anymore, and that's like a big reason why people see people like go to different coaches, right? Because they would just want something they believe in. So I think a lot of times, like as a coach, I find myself like explaining more things in detail to make sure they know what's going on, and that is where they disconnect, right, from the old coaches. They don't know what's going on. I feel like that's a big thing where they aren't progressing because they don't have a clue or like what is the goal, what we're trying to do right now. That's the biggest thing. But like in actuality, what program wise, what's going wrong on the program itself? That's the big question, man. I don't know.
What are sort of like most common things? Like, so obviously like loads of people.
Okay, so So when I get athlete, I think I change accessories the most.
You change accessories the most. Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I just think most people just don't program accessories very well in regards to like rep ranges, frequency, set counts.
Are you gonna exercise it themselves?
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
do some lat pull down. There you go.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest thing I tend to change, or the biggest variations we have between coaches is like how we program accessory lifts. People are still like, I call it old school. I mean, it depends on who you are, right? Where you're doing like 4x15, which is something like I wouldn't program myself, right?
Sounds like a Jim Wendler 531.
Yeah, exactly. So like there's certain things that I wouldn't program, and it depends on like where you are, I guess, in like based on social media, where you get information from, I guess. So that's the biggest thing in regards to like accessory lifts. Frequency as well, like RPEs as well, like doing things like at low RPEs. Like I've changed a lot over the years of how I program accessory lifts. I used to be like 3x12 at like 6-7.
Yeah.
Nowadays, like I'm not programming that because I just know that's not enough to actually like gain something out of it, right? So people are still, I think, not progressing in the way they program accessory lifts. They're focused too much on the SBD, and as coaches, they've not progressed as much when it comes to how to program accessories effectively to actually gain muscle, you know?
Yeah, I started to think about that a lot. I think one of the things is also like knowing if you are going to prescribe an exercise, I think it's important that you've done the exercise yourself with the accessories, you know. And I think I definitely think that there's probably, I get it, right? Like the SBD lifts are very important and they're core, but I think that there can be some more attention being put to it. I think for me, one of the things that I sort of think about is like, okay, what's the experience of actually doing those accessories at those sort of rep ranges? Like, for example, if you do sets of 6 to 8 on a chest supported row, like actually when you come to actually do it, you're probably lifting a weight that's so heavy that you can't probably execute it properly.
That's a good thing as well.
Yeah.
So rep ranges and like knowing what
And
to do
tempo
for
as well.
certain, for
I
certain
program
things.
tempo for some accessories.
So yeah, you can like see someone and be like, okay, I'm not giving you like 6 to 8 because I know you'll just force weight on the bar or on the machine or whatever and do it bad form. So just knowing what things to be programmed in certain ranges is also important for me to execute to high quality as well. So yeah, I think people just like do the program and then they throw in accessory later on while giving it like as much thought, but it matters a lot. And as we know, like getting muscle mass is a very core part for like just being, a stronger athlete. And not only muscle mass, like for coaching accessories, but like how they impact how you lift as well. You mentioned earlier, like biomechanics, right? I think you can just gain a lot for an athlete without having to cue them or anything. Just put in the right movements and program to get them where they want to be without having to like say like, hey, use like this random cue or whatever. You can like get them stronger without even like giving them a cue by putting them a good accessory lift.
Yeah. So one of the sort of cliches that often get thrown around of social media is, oh, you have to take your accessory seriously. What does that mean to you as a coach? Is taking the accessory seriously just taking it to failure, or does it mean something a bit more?
Yeah, I think that's what everyone means. Just taking it to failure and not like just like skipping them or like half-assing them. So yeah, I do think taking it to failure is what they mean, because we see it all the time. People like finish their top set
and they're tired,
right?
And they just want to get it done.
Exactly. So I had a client, Sam. You said like treating it as like 2 workouts, right? So you do your compounds and then the other workout now your accessory lifts. So having like 2 workouts in one is like a good way to like think about like, this is not done. You still have more work to do, and it might even be more important than what you've done beforehand as well to get you stronger. So
I also think like one of the things with like taking your accessory seriously is also like knowing what you're trying to achieve from it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, are you trying to target a certain movement? Are you trying, like is being, let's say is the protraction chest supported row like the important bit? Do you know what I mean? I think also like knowing what the goal is and like knowing how to execute it properly is probably important. But that probably comes hand in hand with like communication with the athlete, right?
Exactly. That's what I mentioned. Like a lot of times I go through someone's old program and I'm like, why are you doing this? And they're like, coach is pregnant for me. And then you see like a disconnect in like their worth of the program, right? They have no clue why they're doing it. So the effort they're putting into it could be slacking, and like that could be the key thing to get them further.
One of the things that you said earlier on is like athlete buy-in. Like, what do people need to understand to like optimize athlete or to maximize athlete buy-in into the coaching process?
Oof. I mean, you follow me, right? You see how I am online and like how I try and be very confident, right? I think that's a big part of like being a coach, being very confident in what you preach and what you say is the big reason your athletes will believe in you in regards to what you prescribe to them. If you're always like unsure in your own self, it's not a very good thing, right? Because they're going to be unsure in you too.
Yeah.
So buy-in comes from being confident in what you're given, being able to explain everything you've got on program, right? Trying to be less random, like, and if you are being random, like let them know, like I'm doing this thing on program because I just want to see how it goes.
Yeah. I think honesty is part of it's going to be an important part of it. And I think part of being honest is also like working within your own sort of circle of competence. And I think like, if you tell the athlete, you know what, I'm not sure if this is going to work, but we're going to try it and see, X, Y, Z, right? And then if you tell your athlete, you know what, I was having a conversation with another coach and like they suggested this, and then we're going to try this because of this reason. Do you know what? They appreciate that.
Yeah.
Like I've definitely had like moments where like, okay, I'm not quite sure where to go from here with this particular situation. And like, I've actually had athletes tell me, you know what, I really appreciate that, you did X, Y, Z. And I think that really helps with the buy-in. That, because it just shows that you're invested in yourself and you're invested in like trying to find a solution.
Yeah, you haven't got like a very high ego. I had a client send me a video saying like, hey, this coach said this thing online. I was like, yeah, it's actually quite good. We'll implement that. Yeah. I think that just showing that you aren't like stuck in your ways or dogmatic with your approach. Yeah. And you're open to actually get them where they want to be. That's very important, right? So yeah, I think just being very honest with your clients is a big part of it. And like even with progression, don't like gaslight or lie. So like things are going okay when they're not. Like be like, things aren't going okay and I'm gonna try hard to get better, right? I'm very honest when it comes to like how or what I expect from them as athletes, right? And if things aren't going well, I'm letting them know like I feel like things could be better. So I think that's a big part of it as well. Sometimes they feel like things aren't going well and they're alone trying to get better. but they know that you also can recognize that things aren't going well here.
Yeah.
I mean, do better. I think that's a big part in like them trusting you as a coach and like seeing that you're trying to get them where they want to be, rather than like just, you know, running in circles.
Do you know what? Like, I think the other thing that's also important that a lesson I learned a few years ago was it's okay for things not to. It's like we talked about bad days, right?
Yeah.
It's okay for like you have to like have a couple bad weeks for whatever reason, but so long as you can present to the athlete that this is probably what's going on, and like we you know, you can expect it, and then like if you can present like a plan if the next solution doesn't work, like they can actually like trust and buy into the process. But if you're sort of like not sure yourself and then you don't talk to the athlete, they start to lose faith in you. And I think I've definitely seen that.
And it's got to work. Like you can't always like say like trust process. You have to like show that that will work eventually, right? So that's a big part as well. Like just being a good coach gets you a long way, right? You can't just say to everyone like trust me. No, they gotta see some sort of like results from what you're saying as well. So
So one of the cornerstones for making good decisions is being able to monitor what is going on with the athlete, especially with performance, because at the end of the day, that's what we care about. So what do people need to know when it comes to thinking about monitoring training programs and monitoring performance and monitoring athletes?
Yep. There are like quite a few metrics that everyone uses, right? We have E1RMs, tonnage, stress index, like so much things people are looking at, total like volume in regards to like sets and reps, which all have some value in some ways. I think sometimes they can be like the same thing. You know what I mean? Like tonnage can show you sets and reps as well. So like they all like work together. So trying to like not have, I think not having too much variables is a good thing. So for me personally, I use E1RM, total sets, total reps. And those are my three that I literally only use. I used to have tons of program, but I found that like it relies on the athlete thing in the sheet very well.
For people who don't know, what's E1RM?
Estimated 1RM max.
Estimated 1RM max. Okay, and how do we work that out as coaches?
So there are a lot of formulas. I'm not sure what formula you use, but I don't want to butcher the name of the formula I got.
Ziki?
Yeah, that's what I use as well.
Yeah.
To me, that's like one of the best formulas that they have. I think all the other ones over inflate numbers, right? So just understanding the formulas and how they impact, you know, training.
How should we, okay, in that case, how should we understand it? How should we use and not use E1RMs?
Yeah, so I use E1s a lot. Like I look at it quite a lot, I'd say, and it helps me like have numbers, but you need to like use a lot of context, right? You want to be using your E1RMs for the same rep ranges, similar rep ranges, because with that formula, for example, when you get above like 5 reps, we start to see it like, you know, inflate highly. So knowing
in higher reps than 5.
Yeah. And 5 reps tends to like give you like a larger estimation compared to like a single. And also it relies on having a good RP rating as well. So understanding that the E1RM is also tied to how well you judge the set based on RPE. What's a big limitation?
Okay, so what's key for being good at rating RPE? Like if you're dealing with a lifter for the first time, like what do people need to know about rating RPE? Like is you know,
there's a lot of debate on like what RPE actually is, right?
Because I think the first time that I've seen something that sort of doesn't coincide with what I think this was like the strength athlete made a post once where it was like RPE is not RIR, and I was like, actually I define RPE by RIR, so like likewise, does it matter? Likewise. Like, okay, so you know, where's your take on that?
Yeah, for me an RPE, I'm definitely an RPE is RIR guy. That's the only way I look at it. I don't look at it like in any other way than reps and reserve.
Is there any usefulness in rating it as an alternative to IRL?
Yeah, you can use it in ways of like kg in your tank. So you can know like a 1 RPE equates to like 7 kg or 5 kg. So in those cases, like let's say you have someone like who hasn't got like a lot of work to do in the bench press, they have like a low like bench PR. Using it in that sense to like work off like how much you have left in the tank is a good way. So maybe like someone bench PR like 50 kg, and you use like RP9 to estimate like 3 in reserve. kg in reserve. So it's a very like nuanced way to use it. I've not used it in that way, but I have seen people like use it in that way and get good use out of it. So we can use it a lot for like picking loads and like leaving like rep load in the tank. But for me, like reps reserve is the biggest way I'm using it. And to me, like judging it based on that just makes sure you're more like consistent across the board. There's less like variation. Like a 9's a 9, a 10's a 10. There isn't like fast RP5 or like a slow RP5. It's like it's just going to be an RP5, right?
Yeah. So, where's your take on velocity and its use with? So you currently use a velocity tracker yourself. What's is that something that you use to help people rate their RPs more accurately, or do you use it in a slightly different way? Do you have athletes that use velocity? Like where you at with velocity?
So yeah, I enjoy using it a lot. I've been using it since last year, September. The reason why I got into it was I gained a lot of weight, right? And my lift just felt very different. Mainly my squat, it just felt different. I had a hard time like rating my RPEs. I went from being someone who squatted very fast to squatting a lot slower as I gained weight. And it really threw me off in regards to like knowing how I feel on each day. And that is what led me to like getting, a tracker. So since then I have like become a lot more in touch in regards to like knowing how I feel right now. I mean, I've cut weight, so I'm again fast again, but it did help me a lot to just like detach from how I felt and just focus more on the numbers, which in my case were quite accurate in regards to like how I felt, right, matching the RPEs and the speed. So
do you think we'll get to a point where it's standard practice for everyone to use velocity, or do you think like there'll still be a large portion of people that probably won't use it?
So going into like actually using it, right, I think people overestimate how much they have to use it, or how much the data is going to like guide them in regards to like what they should be doing, or how much work they have to put in to like learn how to use the speeds. And when you first like start using it, you aren't even doing anything. You're just getting data, right? You're just like logging your speeds, what RP you think it is, and that's it. I think people think they have to do some sort of like serious calculations or like make it like a crazy chart to figure things out, when it's just like giving you a bit of guidance. It's not like something that's very, in my opinion, very complicated to get the hang of.
So if a lifter approaches you and is considering buying a velocity tracker, when should someone be like, yeah, this is like probably the right time for you? Or when would you say to someone, actually, there's probably other things that are probably worth investing at this point in time?
Yeah. We're like Rack having a tracker in regards to how important is it? Not very, right? We've been training without tracker. I mean, me for years without doing it, right? And I've got a long way. I've been fine without it. So it isn't a case of like you need to have this up while your training will be bad, right? It's just a good tool to add to your training, and like anything else, like having a good coach, having a good belt, like all these things just add to your training. I wouldn't say like it's like a crucial part of like being good at gauging your like RP or like gauging how strong you are on each day. So
yeah,
it's beneficial. When you start using it is a good question, because there's big limitations when it comes to like velocity, right? Biggest one being like if your form isn't like similar each time you lift, you're having like a lot of misgrooves, that can really throw off how good the data is, the tracker, right? So as a beginner lifter, you might not have your technique refined yet.
Yeah.
And that means your speeds could be like all over the place in regards to like how to rate them. So I think that's the big setback when it comes to being like a beginner and using it. Your information could be a bit like skewed in regards to like how everything like looks. And you also probably have like not a good rating of RP in general. So that could also be impacting like how well you are using it, because it relies on your RPs too. It's not like you can't use it by itself. So it's very variant depending on how well you are and how well you currently lift. But the benefits of it, I found personally, is like I try a lot harder when it's on the bar. Like you know that to get a good,
there's always that max intent.
Exactly, because you can't use the speed well unless you're applying similar amount of tent or similar amount of form as well. So it works. It helps you work hard to like dial your technique and put more effort into everything you're training. So that's a big part of it as well, which I think is like not bias, but like a subconscious thing it aids you with. Yeah.
I think one of the things I always say to athletes is like, I mean, fortunately enough, I think Stance have done a good job in making it a lot more affordable, because I think the last popular one was about £400.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it was a rep one,
which is why no one uses it, right? Everyone's been using it a lot now because Stance is like so cheap.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's so much more accessible, I think for lifters that are at that level, I think it's definitely, a definitely viable, thing to invest in. But I think one of the things I always say is like, I think you need to treat your powerlifting progress kind of like a business, and you got to think, okay, for every penny that you spend, what's the ROI on this? It's like, okay, if you being a little bit more accurate with your RPEs, or your readiness for that day, if that's going to make you a better athlete, go for it, right? Because I see a lot of athletes, some, probably not everyone, but like some athletes who spend a lot of money on things that give very little return, but they give them full sense that it's going to give them a return, right? Like, I know some people who've got like 12 bar shirts, and I'm just like, You spent how much on that?
Yeah.
Like you add that up. Is that you could have like spent that on like meal prep, or like you could have spent that on maybe the velocity tracker is the best
Just
thing.
go on
for you.
Amazon and get a little benchmark for £2.
Yeah, like
that's what I use.
it's like, okay, you know, I always talk to people about that. I'd be like, yo, what's the ROI of this, right? Like if you had a finite, amount of resource, which
compared to most tools, I'd say VBT is like a very now easy tool to use. Affordable tool now, easy to use as well. You put it on a bar, it's like out of the way really. So it has been a nice addition to the community in my opinion. Like just having that ease of access, and we've seen people are using it a lot now. I do have a few clients using it as well. I think it helps them to like stay more accountable when it comes to like giving me their ratings too.
Were there any athletes that you sort of said to them, be like, yeah, I think it's time for you to use a velocity tracker, or have they always been the ones who are keen to get on it first?
A bit of both. I have clients, not clients. I like two people say they were like unsure RP ratings if they should get it. I was like, yeah, definitely get it, because like I said, like I feel like anyone can benefit from it in some aspect. I think there's like more positive than negative. I don't think. Yeah, I can't see it being a negative to anyone's training as long as they know how to use it.
Yeah.
Right. So education is obviously very important when it comes to like using the VBT. Like you can use it wrongly. Exactly.
Static RP and progressive RP seems to be another hot topic as well. What's your take on that discussion or that debate?
Yeah. So you talked, and I mentioned that in my opinion, I think it's a false model, right? In the sense of, well, first of all, like I can't be too ignorant, right? You gotta really like see how it works and the variations of the model to like really like make a good like account of it. I've not seen enough of how it's programmed to, or how I've seen like 10 videos of like Mike like covering how it works, but I still don't really get how it looks long term. I think that's the biggest issue, right? It's hard to like know or respect the model or give an opinion on it when you don't know how it looks over time. So it's a bit of a tough one, honestly. And are they using it how I'm using it? I'm using like static RP here and there. I might have like one day of the program that's like static, and one day in ascending. So it's a tough topic in my opinion, because you really need to like understand how it's being like implemented, and whether or not it's truly like static, or does it have like a lot of elements of ascending RP. Like, do you have like a week one where you go lighter, now you like going from like 5 to like 7 for the whole block, and then what exactly is going on to really get like a good opinion of how it works, right?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like the sort of like rationale behind the sort of static RP approach to like running a block. Like superficially speaking, I think it makes sense in the sense that like, we are assuming that we can influence like adaptation by manipulating variables, right? And like, and it's about coming up with, like a minimal viable program and just seeing how the athlete responds to that like repeated dose. But I also do think that I do think anecdotally, like on a collective level, I do think that there is validity in that actually we can influence like fitness and fatigue, like not to a total level, but like if you the fact that like for the vast majority of like programming for powerlifters, people have always manipulated variables through the block, right? And I think I did hear like a critique that like progressive RP gives people a false sense that they're making progress, but
so what?
But I don't. But I at the same time, I don't think that athletes are. I don't think they're ignorant to the fact that, like, actually, you are lifting heavier, but I think they are also aware that they are lifting a high intensity load. If that makes sense. I think from block to block, I do think that with educating your athletes, I do think athletes can appreciate that, and also. I think a lot of athletes would find the static RP model to be a bit boring. And I do think like enjoying the process is a big thing for it. And so that's sort of been my take. I have taken on like one athlete who I can't remember who they were working with, but they were working with another coach who have adopted the emerging strategies framework, And they really didn't enjoy it. Like they just didn't like the fact that like they were being spammed the same microcycle like repeatedly, and it's just like, you know what? I know there's a whole thing of like doing what needs to be done, but actually, depending on who you're dealing with, it might be the wrong tool, right?
Yeah.
I think the static microcycle or static RPE sort of approach to, you know, running a meso cycle just might not be the right tool. And I think you have to take that holistic approach and consideration for like the psychological profile of that lifter. Right?
And also, right, a big part of it is like you're doing the same thing over and over again, right?
Yeah.
But what happened last week is also impacting the next week as well. So like
Yeah.
you aren't, it's not like you're trying to describe it. Each week isn't by itself. You're also like being, you know, affected by what you did last week. So like a single RPE this week is being affected by the one at last week as well. So like you aren't truly having things like assessed in like a fine. You kind of get what I'm saying?
So
It's like,
maybe rephrase that.
let's say you're on week 1, right? And you start at a low RP to get fatigue on, you deload week. You go into week 2, you have like everything at 7. Now week 2, now week 3, what's happening here or what's being shown here is being hit by the week 1 as well, right? So
you're saying that there's a sort of exponential decay of influence from previous weeks.
yeah, exactly. So we can control time to peak largely depending on like what we do. So you might find that if you do like at 7 every single week, time to peak is now 5 weeks, right?
Yeah.
But you do it at 8, so now it's like 4. So we have like a large influence on the outcomes based on what we program as well. So that is like a big limitation of the whole entire model, right? So we're compromising in other areas to make the model static. For example, if you're going to co-gym and do your RPE on every single day versus doing like ascending RPEs, you might have to like pull back elsewhere in the program to facilitate you having higher RP elsewhere in the program, right? So that's a big part of it too. And as you mentioned, like just having fun in the program. There's a lot to it in regards to like people do enjoy going heavier, and you can't really go heavier if everything is the same, like RP, because you can't start at 9.
There's a time for people to like pull back a little bit.
Yeah,
it's you're almost like pre-planning like mental break almost. I think, you know, don't get me wrong. Like at the end of the day, like this is my sort of take on it, and which is why I mean I obviously have my bias towards like having a progressive RP approach. At the end of the day, regardless of what tool you have and like whatever like assumptions you make based on like your model and framework, so long as you can like move it well and create success in the athlete, that's at the end of the day, like doesn't matter what tool you use. Do you make a successful powerlifter? Like that's what matters.
Yeah, of course he has like the whole RTS guys are very good. They've had like a lot of like success in the athletes. But I also mentioned another point where like are the athletes actually doing the program how it's programmed, which is also a big part
which is also a huge demand in like how closely you communicate and connect with the athlete, right? So you know, I think like depending on like who the athlete is, that might filter some lifters out, right? So it's about at the end of the day, you know, my sort of principle is like fitting the tool to the athlete, and that's what my take on it. Like I think you can always like rationalize. I think you can always use like assumptions to you can always use observations to rationalize the model you use, the framework that you use. But at the end of the day, you know, so long as you can manage, you know, the principles of overload, fatigue management, right? So long as you manage those things well and you choose the right exercises, like you're going to create successful athletes. And I think that's sort of my take on it.
Yeah. Big part of it though, like things can work, but it doesn't mean it works the best.
Yeah.
So you still have to like try and understand things from like a deeper perspective too.
One of the things that you said to me earlier on this week is you think like when it comes to being process oriented or goal oriented, you think everyone's goal oriented. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so everyone's goal oriented because a lot of what you do is dependent on the goal. I think not a lot. I think that everyone focuses a lot on what is the outcome they're going to get from it. And if you knew like when things would end in regards to like progression on your lifts, I think a lot of people are underestimating how much they would be impacted by that. So for example, let's say tomorrow you told me, Ando, you won't ever hit a PR ever again. More than likely, I'll just like not powerlift. I'll be honest, because I'm training to get better. That's what I enjoy, right? And I think a lot of people underestimate how much they care about getting better. You might think they love like just training itself, but if they could never like progress ever again, I can guarantee you, nearly everyone would not. You know what? Not even just progression, but like, let's say you tell them you're gonna like start decreasing from today. Like every day you'll just like lift less. People will be like, okay, I'm not doing this again because I want to progress or at least maintain.
I think this is probably fundamentally why like people will eventually give up powerlifting. I think, you know, when you reach your sort of master's years, I always think about like actually like how do like ultra experienced masters lifters, like even though they're actually not getting stronger, they're getting weaker and weaker. Like how the thing I'm always curious about is how they manage to sort of stay motivated. What is it that drives them to like continue to, you know, progress if they sort of know through observation that they are no longer physically capable of getting stronger?
A big part of it also is who's around you and who you're comparing yourself to. So if everyone around that age is also like declining, then you don't feel as much pressure to like get better as well. So I feel like that is the big reason why they might be like, okay, like everyone's in the same boat here. But someone like me, like 26 years old, if everyone is still progressing and I'm not progressing, I'm going down, then that would impact you a lot more, right? You're comparing to everyone else, essentially. In my opinion, I think that's the biggest reason why they could like probably keep going, because they're like, everyone's in the same boat as me. Everyone's also declining, so I'm okay with
So
that.
it's an interesting one because like I think it's just hit me just now that like they, you know, masters lifters probably have to redefine what success is.
Yeah.
Which might be more to do with beating other people.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so sometimes like success isn't just about getting PB. And I think you know, as a competitive lifter yourself, it's like it's not necessarily the strongest lifter who always wins. It's about like person who shows up on a day, person who what's the word, puts the right attempt selection in, right? And so there's that sort of relative success element to it, and there's that sort of competitiveness.
A big part of it too is like people could look at me and think that I'm very like process oriented, right? Because I rarely ever get upset when I train. Like you wouldn't see me like come online or like cry about bad workout. Today's workout was terrible, by the way, and it was so bad to where you would think that if I was goal oriented, I'd be upset about it.
Yeah.
But I'm not, because I know that I can still come back and be strong in the end, even though I had a bad workout. So I think that's a big part of it.
So
how much do you believe in yourself to get your goal is a big part of like how much you look process oriented, because today was terrible.
But wouldn't you argue that by definition that is what being process oriented is? It's like it's having faith that like, yeah, you're not here now, but like you eventually get there. Maybe because I guess it all comes down to like
how you define it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Enjoy the process, or like, you know, enjoy the process, but what that actually means is a lot different.
Yeah, I think
people who are enjoying it because they know what they're gonna get at the end of it.
But that's the thing, right? Because then it all goes down. Like there's probably a population of powerlifters. So I have like one powerlifter who doesn't ever want to compete. Like it's just not in his interest. He's just like totally not interested. And trust you, I've tried to persuade him. And he does it because it's like his form of exercise. And so like and I think the thing about exercising, the success is turning up. And I think for him, he just likes the process of powerlifting, but doesn't really. It is going to be a minority of lifters, but yeah, it is going to be, you know, like you do get people who are like actually detached from it. Like he doesn't care if he's does get stronger, doesn't get stronger.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
Strength training.
Yando, sure.
Yeah. So mindset is obviously one of the sort of things that you care about a lot. Why should athletes care about mindset?
I think mindset goes like very deep beyond being an athlete. Recently I've been a few posts on IG talking a bit more generally about like thoughts, like life thoughts. I feel like how you are as a person plays a big role in like how you experience like training and whatever too. So I'd say like I'm just big on just having a good mindset in general, which ties into just having a good athlete mindset, right? How you approach others in general, how you communicate with other people, how you like just perceive the world, right? I feel like that all ties into just being a better athlete, because one thing, managing your stress levels, right, is a big part of it. And if your mentals aren't in the right place, it can just cause you to like overthink, see training in the wrong ways. I think we didn't talk about like how to conceptualize training, how important it is to understand like what training actually is, and what's actually the goal of training is a big part of it. And buying too, like I mentioned, like how important buying is. So mindset plays a big role. Injuries too, how you approach injuries, and like how much like your thoughts are impacted by what you come out of it. Placebos are very, very important. So mindset plays a big role in regards to like I guess it's more like not mindset, it's like psychological. What's the word?
Personality.
No. Like how you think about things plays a big impact on like how you perform and like what outcomes you get from training.
Perspective.
No. It's just like your psychic physiology.
Someone's psyche.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what it is. Like how you approach like life and how you think everything that impacts you is a big part of like what you get from training and like what makes you become, I guess, like goal oriented or like person oriented is like a big part of the mindset part of it. Things.
Yeah, I think for me, mindset and the sort of like simple way that I break it down is like mindset is your mental algorithm for how you approach situations, right? Like it is like, you know, if you want success, you need to do the right things. And if you want to do the right things, you need to have the right judgment. And in order to, you also want to have the right judgment. You also want to have like the most grounded perspective on what your situation is. And like, I think fundamentally, like that's how I sort of like teach what mindset is. Because at the end of the day, you can always self-sabotage, right?
Yeah.
If you lean into your emotions too much, you can self-sabotage, right? And this goes down to like the whole thing about knowing how to deal with bad days. Like what meaning, what story do you tell yourself in your head? Oh, are you a piece of shit because you like had a bad day?
That's one of the biggest things. Like I hate to see someone like have a squat and their head's like shaking on their squat or like they upset. Like, why are you upset? Like it's not good. Like it's not that deep. Yeah, exactly. Like just be stronger. Like I feel like the reason why I don't like singing is because for me like shows like a bit of a weakness.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. Like you would rarely ever see me show like negative emotions that strongly because I try and like present myself as someone who's very strong, right? I feel like showing these emotions sort of like, I don't know.
I think it sets the tone as well.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Because if everyone in the gym like collectively like has, you know, overreacts. Yeah, don't get me wrong. And if it happens, it happens, right? If you end up overreacting, like okay, fine, but let's have a conversation about it.
It seems often forced, in my opinion. Yeah. Like people often like forced like being upset or shouldn't be upset when they.
How much do you think social media has been like influencing that? Because it's like I definitely. This is gonna make me sound old, but like back in my day when I first started, like people weren't posting that much powerlifting on social media, right? Like, you know, people used to, you know, powerlifting used to be very localized. I mean, obviously, like you follow people on YouTube and stuff like that. I think YouTube was probably like the main sort of like social media before like Instagram blew up. But I feel like a lot of people have that pressure of like trying to present themselves on Instagram, and I just think I think that's probably like an influencing factor. I'm not blaming it.
Yeah.
Like you still have to like take ownership of your own mindset.
Yeah, of course, man. That's true.
But
like
I think some people I think for some lifters, it's better for them to just not be on Instagram.
Yeah.
Not like it just, you know, it makes not just powerlifting but any pursuit a little bit too much. You know what I mean?
And I think oftentimes people emotions they feel aren't even due to like the lift itself, but like how people
think that others will perceive them.
Exactly. So.
And you definitely see it by the way people talk about bad meats.
Yeah.
Like there's this whole explanation.
Even good meats. No one's ever happy these days. No one's happy anymore. Man. It's always like, oh, this is the start. Or like, we're just getting started. But there's no like, this is the end. So it's we're just getting started. But when's it gonna actually like go or end?
Man, it's a tough one. It is a tough one because like, you know, I don't know how you like Instagram's such a strong force, right? And I'm thinking like as a coach, how much influence do you have in like fighting against that? Do you know what I mean? So, but I also think it
a lot,
maturity
man.
As well.
Yeah,
like,
I think you have like a big impact on your athletes of like how you like present yourself as well. Like today, I'll post my workout even though it was bad. I'm still gonna post it and let everyone see that I had a bad day. And it's okay. You know, I'm not like gonna cry about it. I'm still gonna keep moving and like trying to get better. So I think you have a big role to play in like showing that these things are normal. But you'll see in 2 weeks' time when I go crazy that it's okay to happen.
Yeah. Yando, thank you for coming to the show.
Of course, man. It's been a pleasure, man.